Hello everybody, I'm here in nature today at the beach. It's low tide and I am feeling fantastic. I feel very in touch with myself, my core self, and I just feel very, very, very good. And I turned on the camera today because I want to challenge a core assumption about spirituality that you might have. And really this was a core assumption that I operated under for many, many years, but recently I've been questioning this assumption, and I see how operating under this assumption has been harmful to my life and can be harmful to those who operate under it. And I have a feeling that if you too question this assumption, that it could completely revolutionize the way that you see spirituality. So I'll tell it to you now. The core assumption I'm talking about is that transcending the ego is always a good thing. In every aspect, in every way, transcending ego is always good. They say the goal of spirituality is to transcend the fearful, contracted ego, because that's how we can be free. That's how we can embody love. That's how we can give our unique gifts to the world without holding anything back. That's the way that spirit, that God can shine truly through us. That's the assumption. And I actually agree with this assumption for the most part. This is true. But there's more to the picture that must be talked about in order to go about this whole spirituality thing and just being a human in a more healthy, loving, sustainable, and harmonious way. So this gets very complex here, so please dive in with me because there's a lot of both and thinking that's going to be happening here. I'm not saying transcending the ego is bad. I'm saying that always having this assumption that you must transcend the ego can lead to some unhealthy things sometimes. So we're going to dive deep here. We're going to go into very complex spiritual analysis here. So stick with me and we'll dive in. So I'm going to put some graphic on the screen right now. I'm not sure exactly how this graphic will look like, but you will be able to see in this, in like a simplistic way, is how I view spirituality and the two primary forces that drive human behavior. You know, on one axis, we have the transcendent drive. This is the pull towards spirit, towards divinity, towards God, towards Brahman, towards Buddha nature, towards Christ consciousness, towards source, towards your highest self. Whatever name that you want to give to this transcendent force that is one with all, that is your true nature, that is your essence. And then on the other axis, we have the descendant drive. This can also be called the immanent drive, which is the drive pulling us towards our separateness, towards our individuation, towards the flesh, towards our humanity. And so when I first began my spiritual journey, and this is how I thought for many years, was that I thought the whole purpose of spirituality was to align with the transcendent drive and to gradually unhook from or move beyond the descendant drive. And it is true. You know, this is very both and. A huge part of spirituality is to align with the transcendent drive. This is true. Without the transcendent aspect of spirituality, you will never know your true nature. You'll never know your highest self. You will never know God. You'll never know the infinite, radiant, powerful love that is the core of your being. But in examining myself, in really feeling deep into myself, I realized that I accumulated a lot of shadow material from around the ages of 18 to 22 when I was on the onset of my spiritual journey, because I actually disowned the descendant drive. I disowned my ego. I disowned my humanness. And I did this because I viewed the descendant drive, which the descendant drive is the drive that creates ego, our sense of individuation and separateness. I viewed it as an obstacle to enlightenment and genuine spiritual work. I viewed the ego as just being this impulsive, selfish creature, and that I just had to transcend it. I just had to move past it. And so what I did is that I actually ignored a lot of my egoic drives. I disowned some of my basic needs. I disowned some of my core wants and desires, and I shoved them into my unconscious mind, aka my shadow, where they would hang out and surface in less than fully loving, less than harmonious ways, because I had locked parts of myself in a cage. And think about how when you lock an animal in a cage, or even when you put a human in a prison cell, they hate it. They feel trapped, they feel malnourished, they feel unloved, and often when they get out of the cage, they act even more wild and even more impulsively and even more destructively than ever, because you put them into a fucking cage and now they don't trust you. And so this is what happens when in life and on your spiritual journey, you repress your basic human desires, desires that you label as ego. These could be desires for being recognized, for being valued, for being seen, for being successful, desires for pleasure, safety, control, money. When you lock these desires away into the unconscious because you deem them as bad or unspiritual, they're only going to surface again often in more distorted ways. You know, the classic one is the spiritual person's disowning of the need for money. They live off pennies. They live in this tiny cave basement apartment and have virtually no possessions. They pride themselves on being so minimalist and having so little. But then they find themselves having random anxiety attacks in the middle of the night, wondering how they're going to pay rent this month. You know, for me, a shadow I developed on my spiritual journey was disowning the need for communion with other people. You know, when I first began waking up, I was very, very confused. I initially had no mentors and I had no guides to help me go through what I was experiencing. And at the time, I didn't know anybody else who had similar spiritual awakening experiences. And I felt very, very alone. And I knew the entire mainstream culture didn't know what spiritual awakening was. There was no mainstream models or interpretations or anything I learned about in school for what I had experienced. And so I kind of told myself, I'm going my own way. I can't listen to any of these people. I can't trust any of these people. And I did go my own way. I needed to go my own way to a degree, but simultaneously in doing that, I developed this hyper-autonomous shell. I developed this specialist shield that thought no one could fully understand me. No one could see me in my fullness. And so to a large degree, I just shut out the very normal human drive to commune with others. And I told myself, I only need to commune with God. I only need to commune with spirit. I just need to go towards the light and I'll just be fine, you know, transcendent stuff. And yeah, that's me overemphasizing the transcendent aspect of spirituality and neglecting the descendant. And I suffered mightily because of this. I still connected with others, but it was in a very mechanical way. I wasn't putting my full self and true self out there. And I suffered because the relationships weren't very nourishing. I was operating under my shadow in a lot of ways. And again, so what I'm saying here is that we have to listen to ourselves. We have to honor ourselves and listen to the part of ourselves that we might label ego. And so a big reason I am sharing this is because a new framework that I've been learning called Internal Family Systems, or IFS for short, has completely revolutionized the way that I see the ego. I think on the onset of my spiritual journey, and so many spiritual teachers operate from this definition, like I said, is that the ego is viewed as this monolithic, impulsive, selfish entity that just is selfish and destructive if you let it consume you. But I no longer see the ego quite in the same way anymore. After learning about internal family systems and applying it to my life in a very experiential way, which I'm going to have long, very in-depth videos on this framework in the future because learning it has literally had a psychoactive effect on my life. But after feeling into my experience more and then learning about IFS was the cherry on top, I now see the ego as a dynamic, multidimensional entity and system that is composed of several interacting parts, and all of these parts serve a very important role in the entire functioning of the system that I call the ego. You know, some parts play a more managerial and protective role that might try to control your environment so that you feel safe. It may maintain your self-image and your behavior to prevent bad things from happening. Other parts are what are called exiles, which typically are the parts of us we banish to the shadow realms, usually our most wounded and vulnerable parts, trauma that we likely accumulated in childhood that carry a lot of emotional pain, things like shame, fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, terror, rage. There's a lot of pain in these parts. And then what another part of the ego does, which IFS calls firefighters, these are essentially the emergency responders that when we get triggered, when an exile gets activated or when a manager couldn't protect you from the pain, then the firefighter jumps into action to help restore homeostasis, and the firefighter's job is to provide immediate relief to the pain. It's like, you know, a firefighter, like with water putting out a fire. So it tries to provide immediate relief to the pain that is the fire, so it might distract you. It might make you drink alcohol or watch porn or even get pumped up on adrenaline and seek thrills so that you don't have to face your pain. But so much of what this ecosystem is doing is trying to keep pain away, trying to keep the exiles, the shadow, in the dark. And so that's why you develop these unhealthy coping mechanisms, and that's why you can't be fully at peace with yourself no matter how much meditation you do or no matter how much psychedelics you do. And so what the ego can do when it comes to spirituality is that it can actually use the transcendent pursuit, in the name of the transcendent pursuit, to bypass itself so that it can escape its pain. I did this for many years, and I still am feeling the repercussions of it, to be honest. I still have tendencies to do this. And again, there is so much value in the transcendent pursuit. It's very, very necessary and very, very needed. It's a core part of the spiritual path. You know, without this transcendent drive, we wouldn't know our true nature. We won't know and feel and understand our oneness and interconnectedness with all of life. And then, yeah, we will be more regulated to more selfish and contracted ways of living, which isn't good. But without the descendant drive, we end up with this split way of being where we have profound spiritual experiences. We understand our true nature to a degree, but in the everyday human realm, we're not deeply transformed. We still act out and lash out in less than fully loving ways. We find ourselves getting deeply triggered. We feel very uncomfortable in everyday life. We can't find peace within ourselves, and we can't show up fully in all moments because there's so much stuff in our unconscious like that's just roaming around in there, and you actually have to descend fully into this incarnation and actually go and clean it up and reintegrate it into your system. Just going more and more towards the transcendent won't actually do anything to help you integrate your shadow, to help you integrate your humanness. So the purpose of the transcendent drive is to wake you the fuck up to your true nature, to the radiant, unconditional love that is the core of your being. But then you turn that back towards yourself, towards your ego. You lead from that unconditionally loving place, and leading from that place of unconditional love, you actually go back inside yourself, back into your shadow, and you contact your managers, your firefighters, and your exiles, and you tell them, I see you. I'm here for you. I love you. You listen to what all of your different parts have to say. You listen to what they need. You listen to what they want. You listen to all the stories of how they've been trying to protect you and keep you safe all of these years. And instead of trying to simply transcend or eliminate them, you build a relationship with them. You integrate them. You might sit with the manager part of you that strives to be perfect and say to it from your core self, from your loving highest self, you say to this perfectionist part of you, thank you for working so hard to keep us protected from criticism. I see how much you've been carrying. What do you need from me right now? And then you listen to your inner perfectionist and you find that it's been exhausted playing this perfectionist game for so long. You listen to it and it tells you it's been playing this game since it was 8 years old, when you felt that receiving love was conditional upon being seen as good. Or you turn towards your exiles, which it can be difficult to access these. You often need to speak to like a protector part of you first to get permission to speak with and contact an exile. But when you encounter an exile, you can say to it, I'm sorry that I've locked you away for so long. I'm ready to listen now. I'm ready to give you what you needed back then. I'm ready to give you the love that you've been seeking. And then you find that this exile is a part of you that got banished to the shadows when you were just 5 years old. And all that part really wants is to be delighted in, for someone to see how amazing and how special they are. But back then there was no figure to tell them that. So they believed that they were no good. And then the protector came online to constantly manage the self-image so that they would be seen as good. But what's profound is that when you turn towards an exile, when you turn towards your shadow, a very wounded part of you, and from this place of being in your core self, in unconditional love, and you say to the 5-year-old, shadow part of you, you are amazing, you are so special, I see how wonderful you are. Something really shifts in your entire system. Your vulnerable parts, they start to trust you more. They start to believe that maybe finally there is someone, and that someone is you, your highest self, who can actually handle their needs, their pain, their gifts without trying to fix or change them or make them go away. Through this shadow work, you become your own secure attachment figure for your shadow, your exiles, your younger, more vulnerable, more wounded parts. And in this, they start to trust you. And they start to believe that they don't have to run these old, outdated survival strategies anymore. The strategies that make you watch porn or compulsively drink alcohol and constantly distract yourself with the internet and things like this. Because there's finally someone, which is you, your highest self, that can take care of them. And so you can do this inner work in your meditation practice. My practice as of recent has been doing IFS, internal family systems style meditation, where from a place of being in your core self, you actually feel into your body and your emotions and your pain, and you actually start having a direct dialogue with those parts. So the meditation might begin like a traditional meditation. You're settling into your breath, you're finding that centered, grounded place, but instead of trying to stay detached from whatever comes up, meditation will always tell you to stay very detached. You're you're cultivating more of that like higher capital S self energy in this meditation. You know, you're trying to go into this normal meditation stuff, that sense of compassion, curiosity, and open spaciousness. And so you spend the first part of your sit just getting into that loving awareness, that part of you that can hold space for anything that arises without needing to fix or change it, you know, normal mindfulness stuff. And you want to cultivate that awareness first, because the worst thing you could do is be in meditation while in a manager or a firefighter part of yourself, you know, a very ego manager protector part of you, and try to have the meditation be this like perfect, most amazing meditation. But once you feel yourself in a very open and spacious place, you can then direct your attention towards your emotions, towards your bodily sensations, and then you can actually go deeper into them. You feel into them. And rather than like detaching from them and like kind of separating yourself from them like traditional meditation tells you to do, you feel into some sense of anxiety that you have, or some bodily tension, or some wound in you that you feel. And you just kind of gently turn towards yourself and you ask, what part of me is feeling this right now? And then the part will reveal itself, and you can actually engage in sort of like a meditative dialogue with it, from your core loving self to the part, to the younger, maybe the more wounded part of you. You just talk to it and you listen to it and you hear it. And if you aren't treating that part from unconditional love, you know, from the sense of this place of being very open, very spacious, very, you know, open to whatever is arising in your awareness, you know, it might be best to stop the meditation, because you might not be in your capital S self, and you might actually damage that part further by interacting negatively with it. But if you are in, you know, your capital S self, this very loving, unconditionally loving energy, you can have this beautiful healing dialogue with your parts, and you can give it the intention and the love and the nourishment that it's been so direly craving ever since it was banished into the shadows. You know, I've had powerful openings and healings from doing this style of meditation. I find it to be way more effective, at least, you know, where I'm at right now in my journey with doing a lot of shadow work, than other styles of meditation. I'll have more videos and like future teachings on this and the nuances of this technique in the future, but also what will probably be more helpful is working with an actual practitioner who understands IFS and can stay rooted in their highest self while they hold space for you exploring your inner parts. It can be kind of difficult to do this stuff by yourself, but I still kind of want to give you guys like a general sense of how this works, and like still kind of communicate this with the main message of this video that I'm trying to get across, which is like, listen to your ego, listen to your unconscious, listen to your shadow. Don't just write off parts of yourself because you deem them as unspiritual or as ego or as bad. We have to get in touch with our descendant drive, our humanness, our sense of separation, our sense of individuation, our ego, and we have to really listen to it. We have to listen to the different parts of our ego. And really, guys, you know, what you're doing in all of this is that you are learning how to lead yourself and your life from a capital S self place. And I know I've said this word capital S self a number of times, but I really just mean like your core self, your highest self. Being from a place of love and compassion and openness and just okayness with whatever is arising in this aware space that is your experience. And from a place that is aware of your interconnectedness and oneness with everyone and everything, including your own inner parts. So really, you're becoming the loving ruler of your own inner kingdom. All these different parts of you are like citizens in a larger kingdom, each with their own needs, their own wants, their own stories, their own gifts. And for most of your life, your kingdom has been in chaos to a degree. Different parts fighting for control. Some parts have been exiled to the dungeons. Others are working themselves to death, trying to keep everything together. And when you step into capital S self-leadership from just a place of unconditional love and compassion for everyone and everything, you become like a wise and compassionate king or queen who actually listens to all of their citizens, who gives all of them a fair say and places them into a role that allows all of them to flourish and be who they uniquely are. You're not like a tyrant trying to suppress the parts that you don't like. You're not a Donald Trump who tries to exile migrants and minorities and like anyone who disagrees with him. And you're not weak in the sense that you allow the loudest, most demanding parts to run the whole kingdom into the ground while the most vulnerable citizens suffer in silence. In this spiritual work, you become a loving leader who is in touch with both the transcendent and descendant planes of existence, and you're a leader that says to all parts of your ego, I see you all, I hear you all, I love you all. I see that each of you developed your strategies because you are so lovingly trying to serve this kingdom, trying to keep us safe and help us to survive and thrive. But I'm here now to lead you, and I can handle what you've been carrying. You don't have to work so hard anymore. You can trust me to lead. And as you do this work, what I find is that your parts actually start to trust your capital S self-leadership. Like for me, the perfectionist part of me, which, you know, in my work on YouTube and just in my life, trying so hard to maintain a certain image, I found that that perfectionist part of me relaxed and it started to take on a new role. Instead of like attacking me for like, you know, not being perfect or whatever, it turned into a wise advisor that just ensured quality in whatever I was doing. Again, it stopped attacking me for the most part, and it started to speak to me in a much more loving way. When I started to speak to the part of me that really desired communion and connection with others, when I started to give that part of me a say, I immediately started having very vivid dreams where myself and some of my childhood friends, we were living together in a house, just goofing around and having a good time and just being boys in touch with their inner child. And in these vivid dreams, people would give me gifts and tell me how much they appreciate me and how much they value the connection. And then eventually that started to translate into my real life relationship. I started to actually like act this way, where I started to just act more from my authentic self and put myself out there more and tell the people in my life how much I cared about them and appreciated them. And that really made the communion part of me feel happy and feel nourished. And it really transformed my day-to-day experience. I just felt lighter, happier, more aligned. This is what can happen when you start to rule your inner kingdom and start listening to and including all parts of yourself. If you only emphasize the transcendent aspect of spirituality, you will neglect the parts of your ego and they'll become like animals inside a cage that become suppressed, angry, mad, malnourished, that will cause damage to the entire kingdom that is your life. If you meditate to just detach from everything and not be in your humanness, you are neglecting yourself. This is the way I meditated for a while, and it damaged me. It hurt me. It created new shadows. And if you chase spiritual highs through psychedelics, the same thing will happen to you too. Meditation and psychedelics are very, very, very important, but if you're doing it to get away or escape from your humanness, from being fully embodied in this incarnation, it will come back to bite you in the ass. So I say, for fuck's sake, stop trying to kill your ego. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments about this. I think this is like a very open thing that I want to discuss. I sense that I discussed a lot of abstract principles here, and I'm curious about what questions you might have. I'm going to have more videos in the future talking about this. And I want to say another thing about the different parts of ourselves. It can be helpful to kind of create a map of your inner parts. You know, throughout your life and throughout just, your experience of being human, notice in your experience emotionally, somatically in your body, and also just like in your internal dialogue, what kind of things are happening, what sensations are happening, what emotional patterns are happening, what narratives are continuing playing in your mind, and kind of begin to map the different parts of yourself, because different voices kind of speak to us in different times. I noticed that as I undertook this business and entrepreneurial journey, there was a part of me that I have kind of called the sacred guardian, that really protects my autonomy, that really kind of came online and kind of became a little bit like a dictator or kind of like a tyrant. And this autonomy protector part of me, it really, really valued my time and space so that I could have the adequate time and the adequate energy to do this whole business thing that I'm doing with YouTube and creating my life coaching business. And so I really pushed away relationships a lot. It kind of shoved this communion part of me into the shadow. And then I kind of had to have this dialogue between the autonomy protector part of me and the part of me that really desired communion. And they had to kind of engage in this synergistic dialogue, and they had to come to a mutual understanding so that peace could be brought to the entire kingdom. So that the autonomy part of me wouldn't just keep shoving the communion part of me into the shadows, because I was suffering because of this. I was pushing away people in my life because of this. I was pushing away relationships into this. And I feel like doing this shadow work, I really have begun to heal a lot. And these are just two parts of me, the autonomy part, the community part. There's other parts of me, like I said, there's the perfectionist part of me. There's various other parts of me, probably like 7 or 8 other parts of me that I could name that I won't go too deep into right now. But there's all these different parts of my inner kingdom that are communing, having different dialogues, and you kind of have to really map it. At least for my cognitive self, I had to really map it and notice the emotional patterns of each, the somatic patterns of each, and just like the narratives that each are playing and how that's affecting the entire system that is my psyche. And then I kind of had to lead from my highest self. You know, this is why the transcendent part is so important. Lead from that place of unconditional love, and then bring that energy back down into my inner kingdom, harmonize the inner kingdom, harmonize my parts together, so that I could go about this embodied human existence of being a self, of being a human, of inhabiting an ego in a more harmonious way, in a more authentic way. The shadow work is revolutionizing my life. I can't wait to talk more about internal family systems with you in the future, and just more about shadow work in the future. This is really just a thing to get you started. But again, I'm really curious what you guys have to say about this. As we head into the autumn here, this theme is going to be shadow work. I'm going to talk a lot about shadow work. I'm doing a lot of shadow work on myself, doing a lot of shadow work with clients as well. So that's the theme right now. And autumn is kind of a theme for shadow work. Autumn and winter are definitely a theme for shadow work, because, you know, in autumn, our leaves are falling off. In summer, we were in full bloom. And now in autumn, the leaves are falling off. We're a little bit naked. We're a little bit more bare. And that's when our unconscious can float to the surface a little bit more. And it's best to meet that with this unconditional, loving compassion that is our true nature. Best to meet all parts of ourselves with that awareness, so that we can integrate, so that we can do the shadow work, so that we can harmonize our inner kingdom, and so that we can lead ourselves from a place of being in touch with who we truly are, so that we can go about our life, so that we can live our life purpose, so that we can just live as authentically and as freely and as soul aligned as we possibly can, so we can give our gifts to the world, so the world may heal. This is just a message to you. Do what you will with it. Love to hear you in the comments. Let's talk. I hope you all have a great day, and peace.